Hi, everybody. This is Jose Palomino with another episode of Business Growth on Purpose. And today's guest is Kevin Weber, CEO of Right Stuff Equipment. And we're going to talk about some really important salient points for today. Things like supply chain, like automation, like labor shortages. So listen carefully because Kevin's right at the front line of a lot of this in certain very important industry sectors like food, pharmaceuticals, and so on. And I think his insights are going to be very useful to you as you listen closely as Kevin joins our show right now. Well, welcome, Kevin, to Business Growth on Purpose.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, Kevin, always love having owner operators, CEOs of companies, the kind of companies we like to help and the kind of companies that we bring experts on the show all the time to talk about. So just for giving context to our listeners, what does Right Stuff Equipment do and who does it do it for primarily?
We're a company that does automation, and we do it in a number of different ways. We do integrated turnkey solutions for manufacturers. So if they were to say, we want to put in a manufacturing line, a lot of our applications are consumable, meaning food, beverage, dietary supplements, pharmaceutical products, things like that. We would integrate a system that meets their needs as they define them. So they would say, we want to run this type of product at this rate, this many hours. These are the components that need to go into it. And we would put together a turnkey installation that would handle those or provide those deliverables. We also design and build machinery. So certain types of packaging machines we design and build. And we also do some third-party custom machine builds and fabrication for companies. Most of the companies that we deal with are consumable, what we call consumable companies or CPG companies.
Okay. And is everything the stuff your equipment would handle, would it be like food grade, pharmaceutical grade at times?
Yes, food and pharmaceutical. Most of what we're dealing with are stainless and food grade components.
Okay.
That keeps the shop clean. So we focus on those industries that have a need for high level of hygiene.
Okay. Yeah, because that's its own level of specialization and awareness.
Right.
So certainly that's important. And Kevin, so you also do make certain machines that you sell under your own brand, like somebody wanted
Right.
to add it to their line, for
Yes.
example. Okay.
Yeah, we do. We design and build vertical form fill baggers, material handling equipment, tray forming machines. And we also work with about 35 different OEMs where we're bringing their machines into this part of the country and we're selling them locally and we're providing support and service on those machines after the sale.
Okay.
So it means that the total cost of ownership for the customer and buying a machine through us is actually less than buying it directly from the OEM.
Wow. Because, a lot of times people overlook the fact that the cost of the equipment is only one facet of
Right.
the real cost of you talk about total cost of ownership. And I love that from a sales point of view, like really being able to make that case effectively is something that I've talked to a lot of like your peers and they don't necessarily always get how to do that. So they end up talking about the price of the equipment instead of talking about the price of the cost of the application.
Yeah, and when we deal with people that are strictly price-based, they're probably not our customer. Because you can buy equipment from China in any of the categories that we're into and pay a much lower price, but it may not work. You won't be able to find support. The wiring diagrams won't match what's in the machine. They constantly cut corners on component cost. And so, you buy it cheap and you buy it twice. And the total cost of ownership really relates to what does it cost you to own that machine through the life of the machine. And that includes bringing people out to service that machine. If you're buying it from an OEM and they're in Chicago and you need a service call, it's going to cost $3,000 before that person shows up at your plant. Whereas for us in the local service area, we're charging, $145 an hour. So typically service work is considered that part of that total cost of ownership. And because we've got a full support system here with engineering and tech service, we can keep that total cost of ownership lower by buying it through us.
Yeah, and there's also like there's another term that sometimes gets used, like total cost of opportunity, which is simply saying, the value of the materials that are being handled by your equipment or your whatever you've configured for your client probably far exceeds whatever they might spend on the equipment itself. It's like, there's the revenue they're looking to get from the stuff going through. So a down day, if they're selling like, high-end drugs, for example, that are processed, as an example, pills and they lose a day, that's real cost that you don't recover.
We refer to that as OEE, or overall equipment efficiency.
Okay.
And there's a number of components that go into overall equipment efficiency. There's planned downtime and unplanned downtime. And the unplanned downtime can be the machine breaks, people are gone for break, you don't schedule your plant right. There's a myriad of things that go into developing that OEE number, and it's worth a lot of money. If you've got 15 people working on a line and you're down for an hour, that's 15 times the hourly rate that you're not producing product, and the opportunity cost of not getting that product out the door. So reliability of equipment, quality of equipment, putting in integrated systems that are balanced for your operation and meet your expectations are really things that are important. And a lot of times the people that are just saying, well, how much is it? They're not looking at that total equation. And a lot of times you'll see them buy offshore equipment and they end up having a lot of problems. And unfortunately, it doesn't go so well. So we don't deal with that type of equipment anymore. We are really looking for manufacturers and equipment that is solid, well-priced, fairly priced. And then our engineer and tech service guys support that equipment to keep the overall cost low for the customer.
Right. Well, and you said something which is something we talk to our clients about, which is really filter out. You want to attract the right customer, and you actually want to repel the wrong customer. If it's not right for you, there's no point dancing around it. It's just never going to be right.
Exactly. And unfortunately, sometimes it's difficult to turn away a customer or a potential customer, but better to say no than to take on something that is going to be problematic. And expectations can't be managed, and expectations are unreasonable.
Right. No doubt. So what's interesting about what you do, especially now, here we are in 2022, we're 2+ years past the beginning of the pandemic. A lot of things changed in the world. Obviously, there were some sad things in that, of course, some real losses were taken. But certainly supply chain issues became front page news. Everybody talks about the supply chain. They don't necessarily understand what that means, but it sounds right. And so reliable equipment, like you said, OEE, high OEE type equipment seems to be even more critical in a time of uncertainty. And so my question to you is, as a manufacturer, what have you been able to do to address your supply chain challenges? I mean, you need inputs, materials, and other things to do what you do. And just kind of curious, what have you developed in terms of best practices to help protect your business during these kind of crazy times?
Well, unfortunately, we're doing a lot of the things that other manufacturers are doing. And if you go back to the beginning of COVID and the toilet paper craze, we're in an analogous situation where the industry that we're in has been heavily impacted by COVID. The demand has been high. Part of that is because the distribution of food has been different than what it was in the past. In other words, in short, people aren't going to restaurants. So they're buying more consumer packaged goods. They're going to the grocery store more, which means that those companies have got higher demand requirements on them, which means that they need more equipment, which means our business has been positively impacted in part by COVID. The other side of that, though, is now you've got a shortage of components that are coming in, and a lot of those are coming in from offshore. Electronics, motors, drives, PLCs, the industry and other ancillary industries or other industries like the automotive industry have been stronger than people anticipated. So the demand has outstripped the capacity for a lot of electronics and electronically related goods. And so what do we do when things are tight? We try to go out and buy in bulk. And so when everybody's buying in bulk, it creates or it makes a bad situation worse. So we have been trying to front load on components that we know are going to be short. We've tried to over forecast what the demand is going to be on our end so that we're not going to delay our customers. We've bought in bulk in raw materials, so we overbuy in steel and overbuy in raw materials. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of other companies are doing the same thing. And so as a result, we've got the electronic version of the toilet paper craze. I think what's happened over time, over the last couple of years, has been the components that are really in short supply are becoming more narrowly focused. So in the beginning, it was, virtually everything that was in short supply. Some things are loosening up: concrete, steel. The number of boats sitting in the harbor in LA last week was 28, as opposed to 100 plus in the peak delay time. So some of the supply chain constraints are getting alleviated, but some of the supply chain constraints that are directly impacting certain things that are being built because that part of the country or that part of the world is shut down, essentially, like some parts of China and in Korea and some of the other Asian areas. Those things continue to be in short supply. And so we're all wrestling with that as OEMs and manufacturers and people that are putting integrated systems together. So
now, how are your customers kind of responding? I mean, again, it's not just you, it's everybody in your category and so on. But are customers understanding of that, or are they expecting you to like pull a miracle out of your hat?
Nobody's happy about it. The anger level with the customers a year ago was more intense than the anger level is today, just because the news of supply chain problems is in the mainstream media. Everybody's hearing about it. They weren't just getting it based on this type of equipment, but they're getting it based on ingredients. They're getting it based on everything that they're purchasing: plastic, bags, corrugated, stretch wrap, everything that goes into that kind of common manufacturing process has impacted them. And so to say they've gotten numb to it would be a misstatement, but they've certainly become more understanding of it. But what they really are not very understanding of is when they get an extended lead time, and let's say something normally would take 8 weeks and we tell them it's 16 weeks, and then we get to the 14th week and they get another 12 weeks added on top of it. That is still happening, and that is the thing that's really making customers unhappy, uncomfortable, and it puts us in an uncomfortable spot as well. We've really tried to manage expectations with the customers and understand what the real supply chain potential problems are going to be, and communicate as much as possible so that people aren't getting surprises at the end.
Well, I love the manage expectations and communication. It seems like anyone listening to this to say, well, of course, but in practice, not everybody does that. And, I've worked with manufacturers that I've seen, they did a poor job of this long before COVID. They just weren't good at it. They would be on the 12th week of a 14-week lead time and saying, whoops, sorry, and then they wonder why their business wasn't growing, because you can't do that but so many times without it costing you that client.
Yeah, there's a desire among a lot of people to be conflict averse and hope that a miracle comes along and that conflict goes away. It's not a very good strategy in my view. So when we see that there's going to be a conflict or a problem, we want to get in front of it as much as possible. It not only prepares the customer because they've got other things going on in the background, but it also gives us time to talk about it and see, is there something else that we can do to mitigate this? Mm-hmm. And we've got a couple of those situations now where we're looking at, hey, is there a piece of machinery that we can put in it's not going to be what you're looking for, but it can help you limp along through the process while you're waiting on the real solution. So the sooner you get in front of it, the better everybody ultimately is going to be in terms of dealing with the problems. But it's not human nature. Human nature is to let's not ruffle the feathers.
Well, hope as a strategy, right?
Yeah, so, exactly. Hope is not a strategy.
Right. Wow. So so it's interesting. You mentioned, again, like a survival mechanism, everyone had to increase like their buffer inventories on a lot of essential parts and things. Of course, if everybody's doing that, it almost creates the very thing you're worried about happening. But what do you got to do? You have to defend your business. At the same time, as you look out let's look into 2023, 24. And I'm not asking you to be like a stock picker or a prognosticator, but you probably have an opinion, an informed opinion. Do you think this gets better anytime soon, or you think we're going to be in this kind of grinded out thing for the foreseeable?
This could be another whole hour conversation. I think there's some big external variables that we don't have control and we can't predict very well. Personally, I think things are going to slow down pretty significantly in Q1 of 2023, especially in some of the industries that we're in. I think if COVID really levels out, people will start going back to the restaurants, people will start going to the food service side, the demand for CPG products will soften a bit, the need from them to go out and buy new complete lines will get mitigated somewhat.
Sure.
If oil prices come down a little bit, then people will feel more comfortable going out and spending more money and going out. But I think so I think that's the downside. I also think, with interest rates going up, you've got some inelastic goods that are not going to come back in line unless something significant externally happens. So I think there's another layer to that could mean recession going into 2023. Another part of that, though, is also people are really hesitant to come back to work, and we've got a lot of friction between the jobs that are available and the jobs that people want. And so a positive side of that for us is soft automation, where I think if this kind of economic play out happens, then the demand from our customers won't be so much, we need this complete automated line, but we need to go through our lines as they exist and find out where we can improve the efficiencies and reduce manpower that we can't find and do it in an efficient way. And a lot of that means robots. And so part of what's underlying our business is to help make our customers more efficient through automation.
Sure.
And if you can't find people that will stay on the job, or you can't, the price that people have had to pay for people, inflation has been all over the place. And so our customers are having to pay more to get the same person to do the same job. And then the challenge now is those people have got flexibility, and so they don't necessarily want to do those jobs. And so customers that 3 years ago didn't want to contemplate putting in robotics are now very interested in it. And so I see that as a big trend to look at where can our customers de-bottleneck their manufacturing process by making a specific investment in making that line more efficient, as opposed to what we've been seeing for the last 3 years, which is just get us more capacity, put in more lines, put in more automation all over the place. I think it's going to transition into more selective automation.
Right. So more surgical approach to that.
Exactly.
And, it's interesting. I recently interviewed Lisa Ryan, who's an expert in attracting and keeping people, especially in blue collar kind of manufacturing places. And she quoted a stat. I forgot the exact report she was quoting from, but she said 2.5 million manufacturing jobs will go unfilled by 2028. That's just about half a decade from now. So not that far. So at some point, even, you hear about how manufacturing jobs left the US and so on, but part of it also is the manufacturing worker has left as well. And they're not there to fill those roles. And, the economy and the population is still expanding. There's still need for things. So you're saying, if I'm hearing you correctly, Kevin, is it's not just about, bolting on massive new capacity. It's taking current capacity and making it more labor efficient because they just can't find the people.
Yeah, by analogy, if you go back to 2008 with the housing crisis and houses weren't being built, carpenters went and found other jobs. And now that the demand with COVID, surprisingly, caused a huge demand in housing, you can't find people to do those jobs because they went and did something else. And they're saying, that wasn't such a great experience when I lost my job and almost lost my home. Maybe I'll just stay safe over here and do something different. So I think the friction of getting people to do the jobs that are available versus the jobs that people want to do is very real. And in the manufacturing side, a lot of those jobs are not the jobs that people really strive for. That's not what they want to do. And so it is an opportunity to find ways to get that efficiency through automation and not have to rely on those people. Now we get into a political discussion about, well, there's a lot of people that are south of the border who would do those jobs. And politically, there's a lot of people who don't want to allow those people into the country. I get it, but we're exacerbating the problem by having a worker shortage and not allowing workers to come in that are willing to do that type of work. And then we're having to pay more for the people that are willing to do it, or we find ways to automate. I mean, you look at there's even places like in airports now where there's a coffee kiosk that's handled by a robot. Right. You go to that station and a robot makes your coffee. And I was recently in San Francisco where they had a large coffee company, and about 25 feet away was a robotic unit, and the line was getting long and people would spill over to the robot, and they seemed to be pretty happy with getting their coffee from a robotic system if they didn't have to wait a long time. So automation is coming, you can't stop it, and it's just a matter of how do our customers in other industries selectively figure out how to employ that automation. And robotics are also coming down in cost somewhat, while labor cost is going up. So there's different inflection points for making that type of automation more economically viable for our customers and other people that are in the manufacturing industry. It's a really interesting dynamic. And also, there's, because of the supply chain problems, there has been onshoring. Mm-hmm. Some manufacturers have come back to the US. And so those are providing more jobs. And now they're saying, well, how do we get, we brought this plant back to the US. I can't get people that want to come in and do this work. How do we make this plant that we just reinvested in efficient and effective? And so there's lots of opportunities for automation.
Well, and what's interesting about that, two things immediately that come to mind, Kevin, is one is, that years ago, decades ago, companies saying we're going to open a plant, it's going to be good for 1,000 jobs, whatever. Today, they can't fill those 1,000 positions, even though they might be wanting to offer them, right? Or it's 500 jobs, whatever the thing is, but it's still hard to fill. But the other thing, and the real takeaway for me in hearing you describe these things, Kevin, is how you as an owner, as a CEO, are looking at the complexity of the world and making decisions based on that to the best of your ability, which is what owners should do, but it's not as common as it should be. So the reality is you are obviously a strategic thinker. And my question to you is, were you always that way, or was it just experience that kind of got you thinking, I got to start looking further down the road than just what's in my pipeline today?
I don't know. I've always been intellectually curious as to how do things work. And the economy is one of the most complex things to try to figure out how does it work. Yeah, but along those lines, I don't want to suggest that automation is going to replace all these jobs, but it's changing the jobs that are available. Mm-hmm. So the people that used to work on an automation line doing a repetitive task now have an opportunity to be a maintenance person to work on those robots that have replaced those particular functions, but it's a different skill set, and it means that people have to get retrained. And that's what I'm talking about with friction. There's a friction between I'm just going to do this all day versus I'm going to figure out how to make this thing work so that it can do this all day and I don't have to. So I think there's a lot of complexity to what's happening today with rising labor rates, difficulty in the supply chain, difficulty or increasing raw material costs. And how do we as an automation company help our customers that are wrestling with all of those issues, how do we help them get into a better spot so that they can deal with those problems? So we have to think kind of broadly and then apply it to the specific applications. If we don't, we're not doing our job very well.
Well, I love that, Kevin. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, I think these are really powerful insights. I think any owner listening could say, okay, how does that apply to me? Even if they're like in the bakery business, it's still the same principle. So thanks for sharing that, Kevin. And if somebody listening to this episode today says, gee, this sounds interesting, Kevin, where should they go on the web to find you, find your company? What's the best direction for them?
We're under www. Right Stuff Equipment. That's RIGHT. Right Stuff Equipment. You can call us 303-327-4704. We're in beautiful Denver, Colorado. So we always welcome people to come out and see what we do and tour our facility and see the types of automation that we get into and explore their projects and where their opportunities are. So we're here.
Thank you, Kevin Weber, Right Stuff Equipment. It's been great having you on the show. Thank you.
I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. You asked some really good questions. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Very thoughtful.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Business Growth on Purpose. If you like the show, hit subscribe and leave us a review to help other people find the podcast. And if you're ready to take the next step in driving intentional growth for your business, come check out what we're doing at valueprop.com. We've developed industry-leading programs and systems to help B2B owners take control of their growth. Until then, thanks for listening to another episode of Business Growth on Purpose.